In this episode, we've crafted some of our favorite clips with Deshauna Barber, the former Miss USA 2016. She talks about how sometimes we stumble into our purpose and how it's so important just to be ourselves. Deshauna was our guest in episode 7, but for those of you who are not familiar with her story, she was discovered as the next Miss USA at Target while folding clothes. Yes, while folding clothes. While she was folding clothes, a recruiter from a local state pageant walked up to her and said, "You look like you could be the next Miss USA." The real crazy part about this whole encounter is that this was not even part of her plan at all. But the thing I would like to shed light on is that in this life, we don't always know the direction it's going. Personally, I have my days where I am crystal clear on the next steps, and then my days where I'm scratching my head thinking about what's next. And you know what? Both of these scenarios are perfectly okay. The one thing we cannot do is to stay still or stay in an isolated shell, because when that happens, you remove yourself from understanding the next step or what your purpose should be.
I think that what I love most about life is that sometimes we don't realize what direction we're going without a slight push or without fate or some level of destiny happening that exposes us to something we would not have normally seen. And I've always seen myself as someone that believes that our purpose is going to expose itself to us eventually in some way, shape, or form. We just have to be open-minded enough to see that, hey, maybe this is the direction or a career path I can go into. So I think there's one thing that I appreciate about that experience in itself is when she approached me, at first I'm thinking within my mind is, no, that's never going to happen. But I did my research and I realized, this is something that sounds cool. And then eventually, I went on to become the first soldier to win Miss USA and all these things. So I think being open-minded with your dreams is always important for people. It took me 7 years to win the state pageant. So for those that don't know, when you compete at Miss USA, you have to win your state first. So when you turn on the competition and you're watching it and these girls are on stage, they all have sashes on and it's Miss Mississippi or Alabama or New Hampshire. All these women had to compete in a similar style pageant, but at a smaller scale within their state. And to win your state is so difficult, in my opinion. I felt like winning my state was harder than winning Miss USA, because when you compete at the state level, you don't have an entire team behind you. Once you win your state, you have the Miss Alabama USA organization that's helping prep you for Miss USA. But before, you're competing at the state level, you have nobody. So I think competing 7 years straight, and for those that don't know, it's also once a year. So you've got one shot, that one interview, that one swimsuit competition, that one evening gown competition. And every single year I was not even placing. So if they had a top 15, I was not in it.
Wow.
So leading up until the second to the last year of eligibility, because I won at 26, and at the time, you literally have up until you're 26 to compete, and then you age out and you're considered too old. So I won as a 26-year-old. But my 25th year, when I was 25 years old, which was my 6th year competing, because I started at 19, the second to the last year that I competed, I placed for the first time. And I was so thankful because, again, for 6 years, I hadn't even touched the top 15. And again, on the final year, I went on to win. And I think that everyone usually will say, well, Deshauna, what was the shift that final year? The shift that final year is I just stopped caring. I stopped caring. I literally, I think that the first 6 years I had walked into the competition. And I think that as people, we have a tendency to do this, where we'll walk into an interview, we'll walk into a space, and we choose to act away in an expectation that that's what we think the person wants us to act like. So we're assuming, or I assumed at that moment, this is what they're looking for, so this is what I'm going to act like. My 7th year and final year, I said, you know what? Faking it till you're making it is not working. So let me just go in there and be myself.
Yeah.
Let's just see what happens. It's my final year. I'm just going to go out with a bang and just be Deshauna for the first time ever. And I decided to be myself, talk the way that I normally talk, act the way that I normally act, and then I went on to win. And then I did the same thing at Miss USA. I walked in there and I was myself, and that ends up, winning the crown. And it just goes to show that, being yourself is the best version of yourself that you can offer people. And we shouldn't be afraid of holding back who we are for fear of judgment, and I think that that's what the whole process taught me, is that, Deshauna, you're good enough, and you're a queen, whether these people choose you or not, whether the crown goes on your head, you're a queen regardless.
Thanks, Deshauna. Our purpose will eventually show itself to us. The difficult part is that even when our purpose shows up, we still second guess ourselves because it's hard to build traction. I mean, hard. How many of us would try consistently for 6 years like Deshauna to be able to fulfill what our purpose may be? I think the beauty in what she said is that ultimately she stopped caring what other people thought, and being herself was the best version she can offer. If you want to hear more from our guests, see the show notes to be able to experience the full episode.